Good morning, my dears. My name is Savannah Rodas. I'm 42 years old, and today I'm finally going to tell you about the morning I stopped being a wife on paper and started being a woman in truth. Please, if my story reaches you, like this video, subscribe to Whispers of Mama Ruth, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your words give strength to mine. And somewhere out there another woman needs to know she's not alone. It was my husband's birthday, and the house smelled like jasmine and coffee, the kind of scent that pretends life is gentle. The chef was arranging silver domes on the dining table. A florist had left peonies so pale they looked like breath held too long. I had chosen a Rolex he'd been eyeing for months, not because time mattered to him, but because names did. The right name on the dial, the right name on the guest list, the right name under a headline. I also held an envelope with a $100,000 donation certificate made in his honor to a children's foundation. That was my language in our marriage. Generous gestures in place of honest sentences. When love turns into silent arithmetic, you start counting everything: the bills, the glances, even the laughs. At 10:16 a.m., I descended the grand staircase, the kind that curves like a smile someone doesn't mean. The dining room was empty, but voices floated from the parlor, a door left slightly ajar, the house itself leaning to listen. I didn't intend to eavesdrop. Habit did it for me, the habit of pausing before entering rooms where I was expected to be lovely and smaller than my shadow. Then I heard it. "That fat woman disgusts me, Mom," Marcus said, light as sugar over a flame. "I only care about her money. Did you think I actually enjoy sleeping with her?" The laugh that followed had a clean sound, like a glass breaking in another wing of the house. Evelyn, his mother, did not gasp, did not correct him. Her voice came easy, a practiced hand smoothing a cruel fabric. "At least pretend. Do it until you inherit everything that's hers. After that, you know what you have to do. A woman like that should never be permanent." I didn't drop the envelope. I placed it gently against my chest, as if weight could become armor. I remember noticing absurd things: how the hallway mirror made me taller, how my heels refused to make a sound, how my heart stabilized not from comfort but from decision. I have been called many names in my life, some whispered, some printed. Fat was always tossed at me like a small stone from a distance, meant to sting, never meant to kill. But that morning the word arrived with instructions, an audience, and a future where I was a ledger entry, a stepping stone polished by my own silence. I could have pushed the door wide open. I could have shouted each year of our marriage back at them, every charity gala I organized, to make him look compassionate, every event where I stood beside him, the trained smile of a trophy wife who chose soft fabrics because sadness is easier to hide under silk. I could have cried. I did none of that. The air tasted of metal, and the jasmine turned bitter on my tongue. I stepped back, one step, then another. Upstairs, the bedroom welcomed me like a museum that finally admits its exhibits are fake. My dresses, aligned by color and season. The piano I never learned to play. The framed photos where my body was always a question mark someone else tried to erase. I sat at my vanity and looked at my face. My warm brown eyes, the ones the magazines called compassionate, had learned the art of stillness, the way a lake learns not to show the storm brewing under it. I remembered being 18, arms open to a sea that smelled like salt and beginning. Back then, my last name was a ribbon I tied in my hair, not a rope around my throat. I took out that old photograph I kept hidden between sweater drawers and pressed it to the glass. She looked back at me, the girl who didn't yet know the price of belonging to rooms that clap for you and plan your disappearance in the next breath. If you have never been laughed at behind a door, let me translate. It isn't just mockery, it's erasure. They do not simply dislike you, they are rearranging a future where you don't exist. Except as a story they will tell about how you were unstable, ungrateful, unwell. And in that instant, I understood something I wish I hadn't. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's strategy. I took a sheet of stationery, the kind embossed with a family crest that had stopped feeling like mine, and wrote a sentence with the steady hand of someone signing a release form at the hospital. Thanks for showing your true colors. No flourish, no name. Names are important to men like Marcus. Anonymity is how women like me survive them. I folded the note once, then twice, corners aligned like a decision that knows its own geometry. I changed into a simple dress, the one stylists always told me to avoid because it didn't flatter my shape. I let my hair be my hair, not a sculpture balanced for cameras. I took nothing noisy. Passport, photo, a notebook with sentences I wrote on nights when sleep refused me, and the quietest thing I owned, resolve. Before I left the room, I glanced at the gift-wrapped watch and the envelope with the donation certificate. They would still reach him. Appearances must always be fed, but not from my hands. Not anymore. Downstairs, the chef was humming. The florist had already gone. A staff member asked if I needed anything. No, I said, and my voice sounded like a straight line. Doors opened. The house exhaled. Outside, the air was colder than the marble floors, and for a second I thought I might faint, not from pain, from permission. There's a dizziness that comes when a caged bird realizes the door has always been unlatched. I didn't slam anything, didn't leave footprints, didn't announce myself to the security cameras that had memorized my angles. I moved like a rumor that chooses not to be confirmed. I wish I could tell you I was brave. The truth is simpler. I was done. Done explaining my body. Done adorning the emptiness of a man who polished his image more than his soul. Done mistaking patience for holiness. Some women leave after a bruise. Some leave after a confession. I left after a laugh. If you're listening to me now, maybe you've stood behind a door too. Your name turned into a punchline delivered in the easy voice of someone who thinks you won't hear. Maybe you're counting your compromises, your calories, your tears. I don't have advice, only a testimony. Silence can be a weapon when it's not submission but strategy. When it's the breath you take before stepping into a life where your dignity is not a negotiation. I placed the folded note where a pillow remembers the weight of a head. And the woman in the photograph, the 18-year-old who smelled like sea, and beginning finally nodded back at me. The clock in the hallway struck once, then again, and with each chime I felt the arithmetic of my life rewriting itself. One name, one bag, one door. I didn't cry. I planned. When a house becomes a stage, the only way to survive is to leave before the next act begins. That night, while the last candle burned out in the dining room and Marcus drank his wine, without noticing the absence of my smile, I was upstairs folding my life into silence. The note rested on the pillow like a farewell disguised as courtesy. Beside it, the watch I had chosen for him gleamed beneath the lamplight, its gold face staring back at me as if it, too, understood irony. By midnight, the mansion was asleep. The guards outside were used to my quiet walks through the garden. They would not suspect the difference. I slipped into a long coat, flats that made no sound, and carried a single backpack. Inside it, my passport, a new identity card I had prepared months before just in case, a photograph of the sea from my youth, a notebook filled with unfinished sentences, and a single sapphire ring that once belonged to my grandmother. For years, I had managed the Rodas family investments, old wealth. Discreet, the kind of money that moves in silence. That night, I used every skill my upbringing had taught me. Not to expand a fortune, but to disappear it. Through an encrypted line. I contacted a broker in Zurich who owed me a favor and transferred almost everything. Real estate, shares, even Marcus's campaign accounts, into a trust registered under a new name. The same name I would soon wear like armor. Maya Solar. As the sun began to pull a faint gray line across the horizon, I walked through the foyer one last time. I touched the marble column that had been carved from Italian stone and thought about how many times I had stood there rehearsing patience. The smell of jasmine was fading. I had always associated it with love. Now I understood it was just decay with perfume. Outside, the world was still dark enough to forgive secrets. I called for a cab, the kind that doesn't ask for details, and watched the mansion shrink behind me through the window. I didn't feel grief. I felt relief, sharp and clean, the way air feels after thunder. When we reached the station, I bought a one-way ticket to Chicago under my new name. The clerk didn't even glance at my face. Freedom, it turned out, looked like anonymity. I found a seat near the back of the bus, clutching the photo from my youth. My 18-year-old self was smiling in front of an ocean, arms wide open. I whispered to her softly, "I'm coming back for you." Hours later, Marcus woke up. The first thing he noticed was the emptiness, not of the bed, but of the house. He called my name once, then again, louder. No answer. On the pillow, a folded note in my handwriting. "Thanks for showing your true colors." He laughed at first. He always laughed at what he couldn't understand. But when he realized the cars were gone, the accounts frozen, and his reflection in the mirror looked older than it had the day before, the laugh died in his throat. By noon, my phone was off, my digital footprints erased. The driver from the night before would remember me only as a polite woman in a beige coat. That's the thing about disappearing. It's less about distance and more about precision. You don't need to run fast. You need to step correctly. The bus rolled through towns that didn't know my name, past diners opening for breakfast and factories belching their morning smoke. For the first time in 10 years, I saw sunlight without the filter of stained glass or tinted car windows. It felt raw, almost too bright, as if the sky itself wanted to test if I could still bear honesty. I thought about Marcus, about Evelyn, about the laughter that had pushed me into motion. I didn't hate them. Hatred is a chain. It binds you to what you escaped. What I felt was something smaller but purer. Clarity. When a man builds his worth on your silence, the loudest thing you can do is leave. The bus engine hummed like a heartbeat under my feet. I took out my notebook and wrote, "A woman's first act of freedom is often mistaken for madness." But I'm not crazy. I'm awake. Outside, the sky broke into morning. I rested my head against the window and watched the world move backward. Mansions, gates, expectations, all shrinking into it. Somewhere between Greenwich and Chicago, Savannah Rhoda ceased to exist. By the time we crossed the state line, the driver's voice echoed, "Next stop, South Shore." I smiled faintly and whispered to no one in particular. I wasn't running away. I was waking up, and I had no idea that in the place I was going, destiny was already waiting for me, wearing the face of a stranger who would change everything. The South Shore neighborhood looked nothing like the manicured perfection of Greenwich. Here, the streets were cracked, the air smelled of frying oil and old rain, and people carried themselves with the weary dignity of those who've learned that survival is an art. When I stepped off the bus, no one looked twice. That, in itself, was a kind of mercy. For the first time, I could walk through a crowd and not hear my own name echoing behind me. A sign taped to a crooked gate caught my attention. Room for rent. Shared bath. No questions asked. It was perfect. I knocked. A woman in her 60s opened the door. Eyes small and sharp like someone who had learned to distrust beauty. Looking for something, she asked. A place to stay, I said. Name? I hesitated for only a heartbeat. Maya Solar. She frowned at the oddness of it, then stepped aside. Come in. Don't bring trouble. Don't expect refunds. The room was small. A twin bed, a squeaky fan, a window with cracked glass. The wallpaper peeled like old memories. It smelled of mildew and confinement, but to me, it smelled like possibility. I laid my backpack on the bed and sat down. For the first time in years, the mattress was hard, the air heavy, the silence honest. No servants, no cameras, no polite lies. Just the hum of the fan, keeping me company like an exhausted friend. That night, I didn't cry. My tears had already done their service in another life. I simply closed my eyes and whispered my new name aloud, testing its texture in my mouth. Maya Solar. It felt strange, foreign, but light, like an outfit still too new to feel like skin. The next morning, I walked without a destination. The streets of South Shore were alive with noise and fatigue. Children chasing stray dogs. Vendors selling barbecue ribs. Music leaking from radios older than me. In the middle of the chaos, I noticed something that pulled me forward. A small community health center. Its walls were cracked, the paint fading, a hand-painted sign barely holding on above the door. Inside, chaos of another kind. A woman argued with a young man over medicine she couldn't afford. I already told you, Mum. The man said, tired but patient. If you buy that antibiotic outside, I can't promise it's real. His sleeves were rolled up, hair messy, dark circles beneath eyes that had seen too many sleepless nights. His name tag read Elijah Vance. He looked up briefly, caught my gaze for a second, then returned to the patient. Tell your son to keep coming. Even if you can't pay, we don't deny care here. We'll find a way. Something in his tone reminded me of who I used to be before titles and social ladders swallowed my voice. When the woman left, I approached. Are you the doctor? I asked. He nodded. Do you need help? Yes, I said, but not medical. I'd like to volunteer. I can help with organizing donations, managing inventory, coordinating paperwork. Whatever you need. He looked at me, measuring something beyond words. There was skepticism. Yes, but also curiosity. My clothes were simple, but the way I spoke, my rhythm, my diction, betrayed the education I was trying to bury. Volunteers are rare here, he finally said, but we need hands more than we need questions. Welcome, Maya. That was the first time someone used my new name without suspicion, and in that tiny act, I felt something inside me shift. A small door opening, a breath I didn't know I was holding. Days passed quietly. I learned to fold stained sheets, sweep dusty floors, and greet strangers without fear of judgment. I handled boxes of expired medicine and forms written by trembling hands. The clinic became my new cathedral. Its prayers whispered in the form of gratitude and exhaustion. It was there I met Miss Della, an older woman with skin carved by both sun and wisdom. She watched me for days before speaking. You're not from around here, she said one afternoon while we restocked supplies. No, I admitted softly. She smiled without warmth but without cruelty. Your hands are to clean, your nails to neat. Life here bends people. You still stand too straight. I said nothing. Don't worry, she added. I had my secrets once too. I'm not judging you. I'm just telling you. Choose carefully who you let look at you. Some eyes search for flesh, others for a soul. Elijah's are the second kind. Her words stayed with me long after she walked away. I had spent years being looked at and never seen. Now, in this broken place, I was learning what it felt like to be seen without being owned. Every night, I wrote in my notebook by the dim light of the fan. I didn't write about Marcus, or money, or revenge. I wrote about quiet things. The smell of disinfectant, the sound of Elijah's tired footsteps, the way people still laughed here even when hope was thin. On one page I wrote, "Sometimes the poorest places are the richest in truth." I closed the notebook and held it against my chest. The woman who had fled her mansion was gone. The woman who would one day rebuild something new was still learning how to stand. Outside, the city lights flickered like timid stars. Inside, I whispered to myself, maybe Maya Solar isn't a disguise after all. Maybe she's who I was always meant to be. I didn't know it then. But the next soul to walk through those clinic doors would change everything I believed about pain, love, and what it truly means to begin again. The first time I saw her, she was sitting on the clinic's examination table, legs dangling, her skin too pale for a child who should have been running outside. Her name was Lena, 8 years old, with dark eyes that seemed too wise for her small frame and a doll missing an arm, pressed against her chest. Beside her stood Miss Della, the same woman who had quietly tested me weeks earlier. "She hasn't eaten in 3 days," Miss Della said softly, brushing the girl's hair from her forehead. "She has a fever at night. She's getting weaker." Elijah listened without interrupting. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried the careful calm of someone who had already seen too much pain for one lifetime. "We'll run some tests," he said. "We'll figure it out." But when he left the room, I followed and saw him lean against the hallway wall, head bowed, lips pressed tight. "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated before answering. "If my guess is right, it's leukemia. But we'll need lab results to confirm, and those tests aren't free." His words hit me like a gust of cold air. The clinic barely had enough supplies to treat colds, let alone cancer. Through the cracked window, I could see Lena, inside, humming to her broken doll, tracing small circles on the sheet with her finger. She didn't know yet what was coming. And I, who had once donated millions to charities for the sake of photos, now stood in a room where real need had a face. That night, I couldn't sleep. The hum of the fan sounded like a heartbeat racing inside a cage. I opened my backpack and looked at the one piece of my old life I hadn't let go of. My grandmother's sapphire ring. It had survived every gala, every insult, every silence. It was the last symbol of a name that no longer belonged to me. Yet somehow it still carried my history. By dawn, I made my choice. I took a bus into the city center and walked into a small jewelry shop with bars on its windows. The man behind the counter barely looked at me. "What do you want for it?" he asked. I told him. He weighed the ring in his hand, tested the stone, and after a moment, nodded. "You could get more if you waited," he said. "I can't wait," I replied. When I returned to South Shore, the envelope was sealed. I handed it to Elijah without explanation. "What is this?" "Enough to start her treatment," I said. He looked at me, not with suspicion this time, but with a kind of reverent disbelief. "Where did you get it? Does it matter?" He studied my face for a long second, then simply said, "Thank you." Lena began her first treatments that week. The clinic didn't have proper facilities, but Elijah did what he could. calling in favors, arranging small miracles. I visited her every day. She liked to draw on scraps of paper, mostly suns with uneven rays. I like the sun, she told me one afternoon, because it always comes back, even after it hides. I smiled, tracing the chalk dust on her fingers. Do you know what my name means? She shook her head. Maya Solar. It means illusion of the sun. She giggled. That's funny. You're like sunshine that hides, too. Something in that moment broke me open and stitched me together all at once. For years, I'd been defined by what I was to others: a wife, a donor, a socialite, a disappointment. But to this little girl, I was simply someone who stayed, someone who showed up. Days turned into weeks, and our bond deepened. She'd save her brightest smiles for me, and sometimes, when she was too tired to talk, she'd just hold my hand. I began writing again, filling pages of my notebook not with sadness, but with small details. The sound of children laughing through pain, the smell of disinfectant and hope. It was in those pages that I realized what healing actually looked like. It wasn't grand, it wasn't loud, it was ordinary and stubborn, like weeds growing through cracked concrete. One evening, as I tucked Lena's blanket around her, she opened her eyes and whispered, "Have you ever felt invisible?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Many times." "Then we're the same," she said, her tiny hand finding mine. "Because when people are scared, they look away. And when they look away, you disappear." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Her words were too pure, too sharp. I thought of all the times I had looked away from poverty, from pain, from my own reflection. In her quiet wisdom, she had named what I had spent a lifetime avoiding. That night, I wrote a single line in my notebook. Sometimes a stranger's small hand can hold all the reasons you need to stay alive. Lena was my mirror, my teacher, my redemption wrapped in a frail body. Through her, I began to believe that maybe the woman I had become wasn't just running from her past, but running toward her purpose. But destiny has a cruel sense of timing, and just when I started to feel safe again, the past whispered my real name for the first time. It happened on an ordinary morning, the kind that smells of cheap coffee and damp walls. I was in the clinic's storage room, organizing boxes of donated medicine, when the phone rang. Elijah answered, his tone casual at first. But then, I saw his expression change. His eyes darkened, jaw tightened, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "Sterling? Are you sure?" he said. The name hit me like a punch through time. Sterling, my husband's last name. The sound of it pulled the air from my lungs, and the box I was holding slipped from my hands, scattering small bottles across the floor. Elijah turned toward me, concerned. "You okay, Maya?" I forced a smile. "Just dizzy." He didn't press further, but I saw the seed of doubt flicker in his eyes. The way he watched me, as if he could hear the echoes in my silence. That night, I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, clutching the notebook that had become my confessional. I wrote the same sentence over and over. You can change your name, but not your pulse. Each word felt like a heartbeat I couldn't hide. For days, I moved through the clinic like a ghost, careful not to reveal the storm inside me. Elijah didn't ask again, but I could feel the question circling between us like a hawk waiting for the right moment to descend. Meanwhile, Lena was getting stronger. Her fever had gone down, her laughter had returned. The first time I saw her smile again, really smile, it felt like sunlight landing on an old wound. But the peace was fragile. Everywhere I went, I saw reminders of the life I'd left behind, a newspaper headline on a cafe counter mentioning Marcus Sterling's disappeared wife. A television in a store window showing his political campaign struggling under scandal rumors. I would stop, watch from a distance, and feel that strange mix of fear and satisfaction that comes when justice begins to wake. One afternoon, Miss Della caught me staring blankly at a wall. She sat beside me, her hands resting calmly in her lap. "You've been carrying something heavy," she said. "Aren't we all?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but yours has a name, doesn't it?" I didn't answer. She looked at me with that same gaze, the one that seemed to peel back layers of truth without cruelty. "Child, the past is like a scent. You can wash your clothes, change your perfume, move to another house, but it still finds you when the wind blows the right way." Her words stayed with me long after she left. That night, I dreamt of Marcus, standing in our marble kitchen, calling my name in a voice that was equal parts anger and possession. When I woke, my pillow was damp with sweat. I whispered to the ceiling, "You won't find me," but a part of me wondered if he already had. At the clinic, Elijah grew quieter around me. I could feel him observing the way I avoided mirrors, the way I flinched when someone mentioned politics or money. He didn't need proof to sense that my story didn't add up, but he never judged me. Not yet. He treated me with the kind of patience that isn't curiosity, but respect for pain. One evening, after a long day, he sat beside me on the clinic steps as the sun bled red into the horizon. "You know," he said, "people who come here usually look backward. You're always looking forward. That's rare." I smiled faintly. "Looking back hurts too much." He nodded. "Maybe, but sometimes healing means turning around, not walking away." His words made something inside me tremble, not from fear, but from recognition. Later that night, I wrote again in my notebook. Silence is not always peace. Sometimes it's just an echo waiting to be heard. And beneath it, another line, one I hadn't dared to write before. "If they ever find me, I must be ready." Outside, the wind howled against the broken window, carrying the smell of the city's exhaustion. I pressed the notebook to my chest and closed my eyes. For a moment, I could almost hear the faint click of that long-ago door in Greenwich. It was as if the past had followed me across every mile, whispering my name through the cracks of every wall. Before I turned off the light, I added a short note to myself, a promise. Next time the past knocks, I won't hide. I'll open the door and look it in the eye. Then I breathed, steady and slow, the way Elijah had taught me when panic threatened to drown me. If you're still here with me, my dear, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who might need courage to face their own ghosts. Sometimes, just knowing someone else survived is enough to start again. The following week, a single photograph would prove that ghosts don't stay in the past. They find you in the present. Even when you've changed your name. It began with laughter, the kind that fills the air at community fairs, warm and unassuming. South Shore had organized its first fundraiser for the clinic. There were handmade crafts, second-hand clothes, food stalls filled with the smell of ribs and cinnamon pies. I had convinced the women from the neighborhood to participate. They baked, whereupon, painted. For the first time in months, there was music instead of worry. I moved among them, checking each table, making sure everyone had what they needed. Elijah was laughing with a group of children, his face lighter than I'd ever seen it. Miss Della kneaded bread dough like it was prayer. Lena, wearing a scarf to hide the patches where her hair had fallen from chemotherapy, sold bracelets made of red string. "Maya, this one's for you," she said, tying a bracelet around my wrist. "What does it mean?" I asked. It means you won't leave, she said seriously. Now you're tied to me. I smiled and kissed her forehead. I'm not going anywhere. But deep down, something stirred, a quiet premonition that peace is always the prelude to a storm. 2 days later, while cleaning one of the storage rooms, Elijah rushed in holding his phone. His voice was tight, his face pale. Have you seen this? He showed me a photo posted online. A volunteer had shared pictures from the fair. In the corner of one image, barely visible but unmistakable, was me. The light caught my face in profile, half-shadowed, but anyone who knew me, anyone looking for me, would recognize it. My chest turned to stone. Take it down, I said. I already tried. It's been shared. That night, sleep didn't come. I sat on my bed, clutching the red bracelet Lena had given me. My mind played every possibility like a broken record. Marcus finding the image, the media digging it up, the world remembering the woman who had disappeared. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Marcus Sterling stared at that same photograph on a glowing screen. His campaign was collapsing. His charm no longer bought silence. His face, once on billboards, was now in newspaper columns titled "Corruption in the Sterling Family." When the photo of the fair reached him, his heart froze. There she was. Me. Get the car ready, he ordered his driver. We're going to South Shore. Hours later, I was walking back from the market with gauze for the clinic when I saw it. A black SUV, with tinted windows parked at the corner. The sight hit me like ice water. I didn't need to see the license plate. I knew. My body reacted before my mind did. My steps quickened, but not enough to draw attention. I turned into a narrow alley, pretending to be calm, my pulse hammering so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Each corner became a decision. Turn left, pause, breathe. I ducked behind a wall until the sound of the engine faded. Only then did I exhale. My knees were weak, but I forced myself to keep walking. South Shore was full of eyes, not malicious, just curious, and I couldn't afford to draw any of them. When I reached my room, I locked the door and pressed my forehead against the wood. My breath came out ragged. My old world had found a crack in my new one. I sank to the floor, clutching the bracelet. The thread dug into my wrist, a small, painful reminder that I was still tethered to someone who believed in me at dawn. I went to the clinic. Elijah was already there, sorting supplies. He looked up, concern written across his face. You didn't sleep, he said quietly. No. He hesitated, then asked, Do you want to tell me what's going on? I can't, I said. Not yet. He nodded, but I could feel his patience thinning into worry. Secrets have a weight, and I was dragging mine across every step. Later that morning, Lena handed me a small piece of paper. I made this for you, she said. On it, a childish drawing, to stick figures. One tall, one small, both smiling under a yellow sun. Above it, she had written, We don't run from love, we run to it. Her innocence cracked something open inside me. I realized that running, no matter how far, wouldn't protect anyone anymore. Not her, not Elijah, not myself. The past was already here. That night, I stood by the small mirror in my room, tracing the faint wrinkles beneath my eyes, the exhaustion carved into my skin. You can't hide forever, I whispered to my reflection. If he's close, you'll have to face him. On your own terms. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, low and heavy. I sat by the window, staring at the red thread on my wrist until the lightning flashed. If you've ever felt the past catching up to you, my dear, remember, running is easy. Facing it is where healing begins. If my story speaks to you, like and share this video, so that maybe someone else finds the courage to stop running to you. Marcus hadn't found me yet, but someone else had. And what he discovered about my real name would unravel every lie I had built to survive. The morning after the storm, South Shore smelled of wet dust and old smoke. The power was out, and the clinic was lit by small candles Elijah had lined up along the hallway. Their flickering light threw long shadows on the cracked walls, and I couldn't shake the feeling that some truths were about to come alive. Elijah had grown quieter in recent days. His kindness hadn't changed, but the way he looked at me had. It wasn't suspicion, it was recognition. Like a man staring at a puzzle whose final piece had just fallen into place. That morning, he didn't greet me with his usual smile. He just said, "We need to talk." My stomach tightened. About what? He motioned toward the back office. On the desk sat his laptop, screen glowing faintly despite the unstable power. My heart began to race. He clicked something, then turned it toward me. There it was. My face. Not Maya's. Not the woman with tired eyes and simple clothes. But Savannah Rodas, the wife of a fallen politician, the subject of gossip columns and missing person reports. Articles flashed across the screen. Heiress vanishes after political scandal. Marcus Sterling's wife still missing. Whispers of embezzlement and revenge. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Elijah looked at me with the calm of a man who had rehearsed this conversation all night. "Who are you really?" he asked. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I closed the laptop softly and whispered, "The woman in those headlines doesn't exist anymore." He didn't flinch. "Then tell me who does." I leaned against the wall, the candlelight trembling between us. "My name is Savannah Rodas. I was married to Marcus Sterling for 10 years. He used me, humiliated me, and when I overheard what he really thought of me, I left. Everything you've read, the money, the house, the note, it's all true. I ran because if I stayed, he would have destroyed whatever piece of myself was left." Elijah exhaled, closing his eyes briefly. When he spoke, his voice wasn't angry, just heavy. "You could have told me." "I couldn't," I said. "Every truth I ever told was used against me. I thought if I started fresh, if I gave myself another name, maybe I could finally breathe." He sat down slowly, hands clasped together. "You've been helping here for months. You've changed lives, Savannah. You don't need to hide from the good you're doing." I smiled faintly, but my eyes burned. "Tell that to the world that loves to see women like me punished for surviving." The silence between us stretched, filled with everything neither of us dared to say. Finally, Elijah spoke again. "You're not the coward you think you are. You were brave enough to leave. But now, you have to be brave enough to come back, to say your name out loud." I shook my head. "Come back to what? The cameras? The pity? The gossip?" "No," he said quietly. "To yourself." His words hit harder than any insult ever had. 4 years, my name had been a brand, a burden. I'd spent so long erasing it that I'd forgotten it could still belong to me. Savannah, the girl who loved the sea, the woman who could still build something new. I looked at Elijah, really looked at him. The tired eyes, the calloused hands, the gentleness he carried even when he was angry. "Why didn't you turn me in?" I asked. He gave a small, sad smile. "Because you've done more good in this place under a false name than most people do with their real ones." Something in my chest cracked open. I wanted to thank him, to tell him what it meant to be believed after a lifetime of being doubted. Instead, I whispered, "I'm tired of lying." "Then stop," he said simply. We stood there in silence, the candle burning low between us. And for the first time since I'd run away, I didn't feel hunted. I felt seen, not as the polished socialite or the missing wife, but as the woman who had fallen apart and was somehow still standing. That night, I wrote only one line in my notebook. Truth doesn't chase you. It waits until you're ready to stop running. Outside, the wind had died down, but I knew the calm wouldn't last. I had told my truth to one man, but soon, the whole world would hear it again, with or without my permission. If you're still with me, my dears, remember, the truth can hurt, yes, but it can also set you free. If this part of my story touched you, please like this video and share it, so another woman out there might find the courage to say her name, too. I thought the storm had passed, but that very night, an old ghost from my past reached out, and the secret she carried would change everything I thought I knew about the people who destroyed me. The phone call came just before dawn. The clinic was still wrapped in silence, only the hum of the generator breaking through the fog of early morning. Elijah answered, half asleep, but when he heard the voice on the other end, the color drained from his face. He turned to me slowly. "It's Evelyn Sterling," he whispered. For a moment, I thought he was joking, but then I saw his trembling hand clutching the phone, and my heart stuttered in my chest. My former mother-in-law, the woman who had sat across from me, while calling me a papata stuffed with regrets, was reaching out after all these months of silence. Elijah listened, his expression unreadable. When he hung up, he said, "She wants to meet. Not Marcus, just her." I didn't ask why. I already knew. Guilt ages people faster than any illness. He met her that afternoon at a small hotel on the outskirts of the city. I didn't go. I couldn't. But when Elijah returned, I barely recognized him. He looked as if he'd walked through a storm no one else could see. "She's sick," he said quietly. "She's lost everything. And Savannah, she told me something I need to tell you." I braced myself, my palms cold. "What?" Elijah took a deep breath. "Marcus isn't her biological son. She was assaulted when she was young. She hid it, pretended the child was her husband's. She said she raised him trying to erase where he came from. But the darkness found him anyway." I sat down. My body felt weightless and heavy all at once. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. He continued, his voice shaking slightly. "She also mentioned a girl, a child who might be connected to all of it. She said the dates match. That Lena could be her granddaughter. Lena, my Lena, the girl who had given me back my heart." The room spun, and for a second, I thought I would faint. I felt the world close in on itself, every thread of pain somehow leading back to the same cruel web. Marcus, Evelyn, me, Lena, all of us tied together by bloodlines and lies. Elijah tried to steady me. "She didn't say it's certain, just that it's possible. But Savannah, you need to know." I nodded, unable to speak. I walked to the window, staring out at the gray sky. "Evelyn destroyed me," I whispered, "and now she's asking for forgiveness by giving me another wound." He stepped closer. "She's not the same woman. She regrets it. Regret doesn't erase what's done," I said, my voice trembling. "It just names it." There was a long silence before I spoke again, my throat dry. "There's something I haven't told you either." He looked at me sharply. "I'm sick, Elijah." His lips parted, but no words came out. I was diagnosed with ALS a year ago. Before I left, my hands tremble at night. My legs get weaker every week. That's why I ran, too. I didn't want to die surrounded by people counting my money or pretending to care. Elijah sank into the nearest chair, his eyes wet. How long? Months? Maybe a couple of years. I don't know, but I want the time I have left to mean something. He stood up, walked over, and took my hand. His voice was steady, almost defiant. Then we'll make it mean something. You're not dying in silence again. We'll build that foundation. For women like you, for Lena, for every woman who's ever been made to feel small. For the first time since leaving Greenwich, I cried, not from fear, but from recognition. I had been running for so long that I forgot what it felt like to be seen, even in my frailty. Later that night, I found an envelope slipped under my door. It had no name, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Evelyn's. The letter read, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that I understand now. The silence I taught my son destroyed us both. Don't let it destroy you too. Use your voice before it's gone." I folded the letter carefully and placed it between the pages of my notebook. My pulse was calm, almost serene. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Marcus, not of Evelyn, not of the disease crawling through my body. The next morning, I walked to the old warehouse Elijah and I had been renovating. It still smelled of dust and hope. The paint was half finished, the windows broken. But in that raw, unfinished space, I saw my purpose clearer than ever. A sign leaned against the wall. The Maya Solar Foundation. I smiled. It was more than a name. It was proof that I had turned pain into permanence. That night, I wrote in my notebook one last sentence before falling asleep. If time is short, legacy must be long. The foundation was almost ready. But I didn't know yet that Marcus was already on his way, and that this time, he wouldn't be the only ghost waiting at my door. The day the foundation opened, the sky was a soft gray, the kind that feels like it's holding its breath. Inside the renovated warehouse, now painted white and filled with light, the women of South Shore gathered. There were no cameras, no speeches, just quiet pride. Every brick carried fingerprints of people who had built not for profit, but for survival. The Maya Solar Foundation was no longer a dream. It was breathing. Lena, her little head wrapped in a floral scarf, held the scissors to cut the ribbon. Her arms trembled, but her eyes were steady. I stood beside her, Elijah on my other side. The moment the ribbon snapped, applause filled the air. Soft, sincere, almost holy. I looked around. There were murals painted by the neighborhood children, shelves lined with donated books, and a small garden outside where women had planted herbs and flowers. Every inch of that place whispered, "You are safe here." I should have known peace never lasts long. Late that evening, while the volunteers cleaned up, I felt a cold current run through me. That invisible shiver that warns you when something is about to break. Elijah came running from the gate, his face pale. "Savannah," he said, breathless. "He's here." I didn't need to ask who. Marcus Sterling stepped out of a black car that looked absurd against the cracked pavement of South Shore. He was thinner, older, eyes wild. His suit hung loose, his once perfect hair gray at the temples. He was no longer the charming politician. He was a man rotting from the inside out. He carried a briefcase, always the showman, even when begging. "I didn't come to fight," he said as soon as he saw me. "I came to make a deal." "There are no deals left between us," I said. He opened the briefcase, revealing papers, bank records, old photos, threats wrapped in legal language. "I could ruin you," he said, his voice shaking. "I could tell the world you stole everything, that you faked your disappearance. I almost smiled. You don't have to tell them, Marcus. I already did. I took everything you thought mattered, the money, the power, and turned it into something you'll never own. Peace. He flinched, the words hitting harder than any weapon. Do you really think this place will last? He asked bitterly. You think these people care about you? I stepped closer until I could see the panic trembling behind his arrogance. You know what the difference between us is. I built something with love. You built everything with lies. And love doesn't collapse. For a moment, he looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Then his voice softened, almost pleading. Savannah, I've lost everything. Help me. I already did. I whispered. I left. He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope. This is the last thing you'll ever have from me. He hesitated before taking it. What's inside? The truth, I said, and a goodbye. He turned and walked toward the car. For a long moment, I watched his figure fade into the city fog, the sound of his footsteps echoing like an old ghost finally leaving the house. I didn't feel anger, not triumph either, just an infinite stillness, the kind that follows the end of a long storm. When I returned inside, Lena was asleep in a chair, her tiny bracelet still tied around her wrist. I sat beside her, listening to the faint rhythm of her breathing. Elijah came up behind me and rested a hand on my shoulder. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. Hours later, Marcus sat alone in his empty apartment, the envelope unopened beside a half-empty glass of whiskey. When he finally tore it open, he found a single letter in my handwriting. Power without love is hollow. Money without soul is death. You killed me many times while I was alive, but I resurrected, and you are still buried in your own ego. We are no longer enemies. We are nothing. He crumpled the letter in his hands, but the words didn't leave him. They carved themselves into the silence of his ruin. Back in South Shore, I lay awake until dawn. My body ached, my muscles weaker now, but inside, I felt weightless. I had faced the man who defined my pain, and he no longer had a place in my story. Elijah joined me in the courtyard, the sunrise painting soft gold across his tired face. He didn't ask how I felt. He already knew. We just sat there, side by side, letting the light fall on us. For the first time in years, the morning didn't smell of jasmine or fear. It smelled of beginning. But beginnings have a cruel price. And when dawn came, I would pay mine. Because peace, for me, would last only until the sun rose one final time. The night before I died, the world felt unusually gentle. The clinic was quiet, the air cool, and the garden outside the Maya Solar Foundation glowed faintly under the streetlights. I sat at my desk, writing letters by hand, not confessions, but goodbyes that sounded like gratitude to Elijah. I wrote, "Don't cry for what wasn't. Be thankful for what was. You gave me the kind of peace that doesn't need words. Keep healing others, even when you doubt yourself, because that light inside you, it's the same one that saved me." To Lena, I wrote, "You taught me that a smile can heal more than medicine. Promise me you'll write your story, because the world needs to know that even the smallest hands can carry the greatest hope." To Miss Della, I wrote, "Thank you for seeing through my silence. You reminded me that wisdom wears wrinkles and that love is never wasted, even when given to strangers." And to Evelyn, I wrote one simple line, "I don't forgive you for what you did to me. I forgive you for what you did to yourself." I placed each envelope on the table, aligned perfectly, and smiled. It wasn't joy. It was completion. My body was tired, the tremors more constant, my legs slower each morning. But that night, I didn't feel weak. I felt free. I lay down in my bed, the window open, the soft hum of the city outside like a lullaby. My red bracelet, the one Lena made me, rested against my wrist. I touched it once before closing my eyes. I didn't pray. I didn't plead. I just breathed, deeply, one last time. When Elijah entered my room the next morning, coffee in hand, he thought I was asleep. I was, just not in the way he hoped. He set the cup down, touched my shoulder, and understood without needing to check. I was smiling. The sunlight had reached me before he did. He didn't scream. He didn't call for help. He sat beside me and took my hand, holding it until the warmth faded. Outside, the women of the neighborhood began to arrive for their morning shifts, unaware that the heart of their foundation had stopped beating. Yet somehow, the place still pulsed with life days later. There was no funeral in marble halls, no politicians pretending to care. As I had requested, my ashes were scattered in the foundation's garden, beneath the young almond tree we had planted together. Lena watered it every morning, whispering secrets to the soil as if it could still hear me. Weeks passed. The pain softened but didn't vanish. It transformed. Elijah found in one of my drawers a small manuscript, bound carefully with string. Its title read, "My husband said I disgusted him." The prologue began with my own words. This is not the story of a woman abandoned, but of a woman who abandoned herself to please the world and one day woke up. He read it in one night, his tears marking the pages. Then he knew what to do. He took it to a small local publisher, one that cared about stories, not profit. The book spread quietly at first, like whispers through cracks in the world. Women bought it, shared it, passed it hand to hand. Soon, it became a phenomenon, not because it was sensational, but because it was true. It told every woman's story, the one about endurance, silence, and awakening. All the proceeds went to the Maya Solar Foundation, funding new shelters in other cities. Lena named the second one the House of the Reborn. She grew stronger, her hair returning, her smile unstoppable. She even wrote her own book, a children's story about a girl who fought gray days with a smile and a red bracelet. Elijah continued running the foundation, wearing a small locket around his neck with a single strand of my hair inside and a note that read, "When you doubt yourself, touch this. Here is the part of me that will never leave." As for Evelyn, no one ever saw her again. Some said she entered a convent. Others whispered she became a quiet volunteer in shelters for women. But I believe she finally learned that repentance is not about asking for forgiveness. It's about becoming the opposite of who you were when you caused harm. And Marcus, he faded into obscurity, as men who live off other people's light always do. His face, once on posters, was now only a memory attached to headlines of corruption and shame. Elijah saw him once, sitting alone in a cafe, staring into nothing. He didn't approach. There was no need. My last words to him, "We are nothing," had already become prophecy. A year later, the foundation held a ceremony in my name. Women came from different cities, some crying, some smiling. One woman took the microphone and said, "I was invisible until I read her story. Savannah didn't die. She woke up in all of us." Lena stood beside Elijah, holding his hand. "Do you think she sees us from up there?" she asked. He smiled softly. "I don't think she's up there," he said. "I think she's here, in every woman who decided to start again." The camera that filmed that ceremony captured one last image, the almond tree behind them, its branches heavy with blossoms, the wind brushing its leaves as if it were whispering a secret. And if you listen closely, my dears, you can still hear it, a quiet voice carried by the breeze. I didn't vanish. I woke up. If my story reached your heart, please like this video, subscribe to Whispers of Mama Ruth, and share it with another soul who needs to remember that even endings can bloom. Because somewhere out there, another woman is standing behind a closed door, and your share might be the sound that tells her it's time to walk away and start living again.